With so many of the other backs in this class, we have to think about what situations they have to be in to be able to hide their weaknesses or leverage their strengths to make them work. But Brooks is so good at everything that he can help as a rusher, pass catcher, and pass blocker. There's just so much to like about him and why I think he's one of the most underrated backs in the class, and potentially one of the most underrated prospects in this entire class. Hey y'all! In this video we'll be finishing the 2025 running back prospects, covering Rahjai Davis from East Carolina, RJ Harvey from UCF, Tahj Brooks from Texas Tech, TreVeyon Henderson from Ohio State, and Trevor Etienne from Georgia. If you're new to these, my running back evals use some different grading methods, which you want more details on these. You can check out part 1 of the series, which should be accessible with the link that should be on the screen now, as I have more details on how I do my grading in that. Also, if you want to check out my grades and evals of the running backs from last year for reference, you can check them out in the description. For any new viewers, I have evals and full scouting reports out for basically every running back at this point, but if you want to make sure you get a chance to be able to check out the evals in Ashton Genty, Bishal Toon, Cam Skadaboo, Damian Martinez, Devin Neal, DJ Giddens, Dylan Sampson, Jordan James, Caleb Johnson, Ollie Gordon II, Omarion Hampton, Quinshon Judkins, and much more, you can check them out on my channel. Now that we're finishing the running backs, I'm planning to go through receivers next, which I'm hoping to have out starting next week, but there's a lot that I need to go through. I'm planning to go through 50 of them, so it might take a bit, so please, I promise I will be getting them out. So you want to make sure you don't miss the receiver videos and other positional groups, be sure to subscribe. Now let's finish this series. Starting with Harris's basic stats, he enjoyed a nice breakout year contributing 1,166 yards on the ground for a yards per carry of 5.7, as well as getting 11 rushing touchdowns. Also, he did have a couple of fumbles and was somewhat unproductive as a pass catcher, getting just 15 receptions, which is solid, but just finishing with just 91 receiving yards. Looking at his highlight games, he didn't have a lot of tough matches with East Carolina's schedule, but he saved his best for last against North Carolina State, rushing for 220 yards and a touchdown on 17 carries. That being said, while he was unstoppable that game, he also wasn't a contributor as a pass catcher and failed to earn a single target or reception. Looking at the rest of his games, his rushing production was hit or miss, with a solid game against Navy, but averaged his best games against Army and Liberty. As a pass catcher, he at least had production in most of his highlight games, with his best receiving game coming against Army when he got 4 receptions for 24 yards. The problem is that he was just used so sparingly as a pass catcher this year, and Army was the only game when he had more than 2 receptions in a game. So to see if we have another 2-down back on our hands, let's take a look at some of his grades. For his contact balance and elusiveness, he's a very twitchy athlete, especially in space. He has very shifty feet and good timing in his cuts and moves to make defenders miss in space. His shiftiness also carries over to his contact balance, as he does a good job adjusting his weight to avoid bigger hits from defenders. He also runs with really good pad level and does a decent job keeping his legs moving to sometimes help him finish runs forward. However, I say just sometimes because he does have a bad tendency to be taken down at first contact, and especially around the line of scrimmage. He has a bad tendency to be hesitant and does a bit of dancing around the line of scrimmage, which kills the forward momentum and stops him from finishing runs forward on a consistent basis. This also unfortunately limits his ability to convert on short yard situations. So Harris ended up earning a C+ for his contact balance, but finished with a much better B for his elusiveness thanks to his twitch. For his receiving and pass blocking, as I mentioned, he wasn't very active as a pass catcher, but he does catch the ball with good hand technique and has a good transition from pass catcher to rusher from what I saw. He also seems to have a good eye to be able to identify his assignment in pass blocking situations and does a good job getting square with his target. Even with the limited reps I saw, his willingness to help as a blocker and to help his linemen out was really good to see. While there are still some issues in his pass blocking, effort and active feet to be able to stick with the block are sometimes the most important things that backs can do to be able to at least give him a shot to be helpful in pass blocking situations. Despite the effort though, he doesn't always do a good job sending his feet in pass protection, which can affect his anchor. Also, he can have poor posture and often lunge at defenders, which defenders can just roll off of. He often uses hands, but he often tries to wrap around defenders, which could just get him more holding penalties in the NFL. Those issues as a blocker and him not having a productive career as a pass catcher do make it a bit questionable how much he can contribute on passing downs in the NFL. So with that, he just really needs to be able to at least prove he can handle more volume as a pass catcher, and then also just prove he can improve his technique. So Harris ended up earning a solid B-, which is good despite the low volume that he had, but unfortunately finished with just a C for his pass blocking. For his vision and ball handling, he has solid vision, especially with a good eye for cutback lanes. He's also one of the better backs in his class at hugging his blocks to get the most out of them. However, he can sometimes miss the leverage of his blocks at times, which can lead him into trouble and sometimes miss bigger opportunities. He also needs to find a good balance in his tempo. Sometimes he is a bit tepid, and then other times he's just rushing things before his blocks can even get set. In open space, he often rushes things and doesn't let his blockers get to a defender to help clear a way for him. Behind the line of scrimmage though, he has a tendency to dance around and be indecisive, as I mentioned before. Finally, he did a pretty solid job at holding onto the ball with 1 fumble every 111 touches, but needs to ensure that doesn't drop with the increased level of competition in the NFL. So Harris ended up with a C+ for his vision and a decent B- for his ball handling. For his future role in athleticism or RAS, he is a bit of jack of all trades, master of none back, as he's likely a good, not great athlete, likely a contributor but not a playmaker as a pass catcher, and an okay pass blocker. He can be really great at avoiding tackles in space now, but that may worsen when he goes against better competition in the NFL. Also, what makes me less excited about the prospects of his ability to force missed tackles is his poor contact balance, especially around the line of scrimmage and when things get congested. Also, him potentially being limited to zone schemes makes it hard to know if he can consistently help all teams. I think he could be a useful player if he does go to a team that runs a lot of zone runs, but I'm not sure if he's a great fit for heavy gap teams. So Harris ended up earning just a C for his future role because I'm just not overly confident in his ability to be a contributor for all teams, but he at least has a foundation to be passable for most. Also, I do have to do some guessing since he wasn't invited to the combine, but I feel Harris would likely finish as a yellow flag athlete. As a summary of his strengths, Harris is very well suited for a zone team with a good eye for cutback lanes and being shifty and twitchy in space to be able to make his way through those lanes as well as make defenders miss in space. Though his contact balance can be improved, he does run with good pad level to give him a chance to be better. He also has some nice upside as a pass catcher, as he wasn't used that much for the 2024 season, but showed good hand technique and fundamentals to be a regular contributor on passing downs in the NFL. As a receiver in the NFL. Finally, he could earn opportunities on third downs thanks to his effort as a blocker if he can just refine his technique. But like I said, while having good effort as a pass blocker is great, he needs to be able to take in the NFL coaching to be able to further refine his technique and really be a true contributor as a blocker. Also, he can have some lapses with his vision, misreading his blocks, and not running with good tempo to allow openings to be created. I also like to see him use his blockers in space a bit better, as he has a twitch to maybe make more big plays, but can sometimes let it go to waste. Finally, he also lets some opportunities go to waste due to being taken down by first tackle way too frequently. He needs to be able to keep his downhill momentum and let him play to his size and keep going forward. So by taking the average of all his grades, Harris earned a 2.43 out of 4, which puts him in my needs improvement to contribute tier. Though Harris was invited to the NFL Combine, I do think he is a player who could earn a small role with the team, which is why I still wanted to cover him. He has qualities that should be appealing with his effort, shiftiness, and solid pass catching ability. However, his contact balance and vision can be iffy, and his athleticism seems just about average for NFL standards. I feel he is so close to being at a level to be a contributor for an NFL team, but he really needs to go to a zone team and improve his contact balance. I think if nothing else, his effort could give him a shot to make a team as a special teams player, but it will be important for him to continue to improve in other aspects to get some running back snaps as well. As for a comp, I have DJ Dallas as Harris's comp. Both are shifty backs who have enough athleticism to justify getting some touches. Also, both are solid pass catchers who can hold up as pass blockers thanks to their effort. However, neither have great contact balance, have inconsistent vision, and often don't have the athleticism to provide much more over expected. I do think Harris is a bit more athletic than Dallas, but I think there are similarities in the effort they give, and their overall limitations does make him a good comp. As I mentioned, if Harris does bring good effort to special teams, I do think it's possible for him to have a fairly respectable career in the NFL thanks to his contributions on special teams like Dallas has done so far. Alright, now that we're done with Harris, we're going to move on to the last 4 backs of this series, and 4 names that I think are really worth paying attention to for this NFL draft, starting with Rahjai Harvey from UCF. Harvey had a very productive year in 2023 and somehow found a way to improve upon it by rushing for a whopping 1,577 yards and 22 touchdowns on 232 carries, which turns into a ridiculous 6.8 yards per carry. He did have just a modest amount of receptions with 20 receptions for the season, but made the most out of them by getting 267 yards on those catches. He did have 3 fumbles, which wasn't ideal, but he was so productive with the ball in his hands that the team really didn't mind it too much and still gave him a heavy workload. Like just looking at his highlight games against Utah, Arizona State, BYU, and Iowa State, he rushed for at least 127 yards and scored at least 1 touchdown on all the highlighted games. He even scored 3 touchdowns against Arizona State and BYU and ran for nearly 200 yards against Iowa State. His rushing production was also really impressive throughout the season, with at least 100 yards rushing in 9 of his 12 games and over 150 yards in 3 of his games. As a pass catcher, we can see the volume production unfortunately wasn't always there, with either 2 or 3 receptions in most of the highlighted games, and he failed to record more than 20 yards receiving in any of them as well. That being said, really impressive production though by Harvey, so let's see if his grades also finished as high. For his contact balance and elusiveness, he is so much fun to watch and might have the most fun highlights in the running back group after Ashton Genty. It's just so fun to watch him in open space with the variety of moves he can pull off and his curvilinear movement that helps him escape defenders. His quick feet and acceleration also help him get to full speed quickly and evade tacklers. When defenders are closer, he has great timing with his moves that can sometimes make defenders look silly. If he does have to take a hit, he does a good job adjusting his body before impact to reduce the intensity of the hit and help preserve his body, which is really important at his size. Speaking of his size, it definitely helps a lot, but he routinely runs with good pad level. That being said, his ability to push the ball in college and especially in the NFL will likely be limited, especially since he sometimes just freezes his legs as he embraces for the hit, which diminishes his forward momentum and push. While he has good vision, which was on display in the red zone and on his 22 touchdowns this year, that limitation could cost him opportunities in that area. What also doesn't help his case is his tendency to move sideways as a runner. He'll sometimes use jump cuts to get openings, but he can sometimes spam those jump cuts and eat up valuable time that he could have been using to move forward and end up taking a loss. So Harvey ended up with just getting an okay C+ for his contact balance, but earned a fantastic A- for his elusiveness. For his receiving and pass blocking, while he didn't have very many opportunities to make receptions that I mentioned before, he was very successful from a reduction standpoint and caught the ball with reliable hands. Also, he ran a few wheel routes and showed good ball tracking skills on those routes to be able to finish the catch in stride and pick up a big gain. Finally, while he needs to work on his pass blocking, he at least seems to typically correctly identify his assignment. However, outside of his recognition skills, the rest of his pass blocking is rough, and he is just such a huge liability as a pass protector right now. He often resorts to just throwing his body and shoulder into rushes and minimal success due to his size. When he does have a more traditional approach, he has a lot of lunges and whips that don't always get square with his target and has poor timing with his attacks. When he does get his hands on the defender, he often loses based on impact and lacks the strength to keep his defender in front of him. For a back his size, it's disappointing to see him not take advantage of easy leverage more and use more upward hip roll to generate at least a little bit of push, so that major limitation could impact how often he's used in passing situations. Also, he did have a few drops that could impact his usage on passing downs as well if those become more of a theme for him, but honestly they seem to be more like drops that are due to turning his eyes too quickly before securing the catch, which is a pretty fixable thing. So we get a bit of a mixed bag for Harvey again, with a great B+ for his receiving, but a very poor, one of the worst pass blocking grades of all the backs in this class, of a D+. For his vision and ball handling, despite being smaller and not being able to scan over the offensive line as easily as some of the taller backs, he has excellent vision, which is always on display. He has a great eye for cutback lanes and leverage of his blocks, which helped him spring off big gains by making jump cuts into those openings. Also, he consistently hugged his blocks to get the most out of his openings and also helped him disappear behind the blockers at his size. What also made it hard for defenders to get a handle on him was the variable tempos he would run at, which often disrupted pursuit angles. He is also so good at pressing the line and then using explosives to break outside. It became a routine move of his to be able to get the second level defenders to bite and then take advantage of their overeagerness and just burst outside. He's just so smart with a lot of his movements and with the angles he takes as well, which shows with his success rate on the ground. So his vision is awesome, but he does need to clean up some of that dancing that he does behind the line and be more willing to take just what the defense gives him some games. Also, he'll also need to clean up his fumbles a bit since he had a fumble rate of 1 fumble every 84 touches. So we continue the streak of mixed bags, with Harvey getting an awesome A- for his vision, but just a mediocre at best C+ for his ball handling. For his future role in athleticism or RAS, Harvey is a tricky player because he is amazing at the things he does well. He has great athleticism and burst and is such a threat with the ball in his hands. He also has great vision to be able to make big plays on his own at any time he has the ball, and is a capable pass catcher who can make plays near line of scrimmage and even on deeper targets when given the chance. But he does struggle as a pass blocker and can have iffy contact balance due to his frame and sideways movement tendencies. So if a team is looking for a complete back, I fear they likely will be disappointed. However, a team does want to use him in specific situations and get him into open space similar to what the Titans and Vrabel did with Tyjae Spears, his rookie season tendency, then I think you're going to get a great playmaker on your hands. In fact, honestly, I may have actually talked myself into the Patriots taking Harvey, so if that happens, I called it. So I can understand if other people would view his future role being higher, due to him likely being limited in some situations, he earned just a C+ for me for his future role. However, thanks to his speed and explosiveness, he earned a green flag. As a summary of his strengths, he has fantastic vision with some of the best nuance in the class to win with blocks that are set up for him, but also be able to manufacture his own openings by manipulating defenders. His smooth and explosive movement skills in space and the creativity he can bring in the moves he throws out at sometimes can make him a nightmare to take down in one-on-one situations. Finally, while he wasn't a frequent producer from a reception standpoint, he has the ability to be a bigger presence on passing downs and could become a big part of a team's passing offense if given the chance. However, while he can hit the home run, he sometimes has to reel in a bit and not get so jump cut happy behind the line of scrimmage and just take a standard gain. That hesitation led to limitations in him being able to push through contact, which he can't afford since his size will already significantly limit that. Also, if he does become more of a change of pace back, he'll need to clean up his fumbles or at be a risk of losing playing time. Same thing for his pass blocking, but to be honest, I kind of think it would be best for a team if they just punted on using him as a pass blocker and just had him go on routes as a safety valve on most plays. Finally, Harvey will be nearly 24.5 years old for the first week of the regular season, which might make him a lot less appealing to a lot of teams. The likelihood that he could lose some athleticism and explosiveness that makes him great right now before the end of his rookie deal could make NFL teams willing to go to a different direction in the draft. So by taking the average of all his grades, Harvey earned a 2.72 out of 4, which puts him in my may have a future role tier. Harvey is a really fun player to watch, but his limitations do add up quickly. With factors that he can't control like his age and size, that could completely take him off some team's board altogether. So it just really makes it a little bit hard to be overly optimistic about his outlook just with those limitations. That being said, maybe a team isn't afraid to take a chance, but I think it's just important for them to account for his limitations on the field. So if they do have a good plan to use him as more of a change of pace back, I think they'll be very happy with the reward and get a quality player out of him. As for a comp, I have another change of pace back with Jerick McKinnon. McKinnon is another undersized back who has good vision and cutting ability to be an instant contributor on the ground. While Harvey wasn't frequently used as a pass catcher, I do think he could be a stable force in the passing game like McKinnon was, and would do his best work in space like McKinnon did as well. If he can leverage his vision and elusiveness in those opportunities like McKinnon did, then he could at minimum be a good rotational player. However, he continues to be a liability as a pass blocker or continues to fumble the ball, the team may want to move on from him pretty quickly. Moving to our next back, Tahj Brooks from Texas Tech. Brooks has been going under the radar despite rushing for 1,505 yards and 17 touchdowns on 286 carries for a yards per carry of 5.3. Now the yards per carry isn't exactly impressive compared to the other backs in this class, but he just always seems to find a way to get a positive gain, which is such an underrated aspect as a rusher. Regardless, he's also an underrated pass catcher, which we'll get into the specifics later. But we can even see that with him finishing with 28 receptions for 199 yards and a touchdown. Moving to his highlight games against Oklahoma State, Colorado, Iowa State, and Baylor, I do want to first point out that in his Oklahoma State game that it was a great performance on the ground and the air, rushing for 133 yards and 3 touchdowns and making 9 receptions for 65 yards and a touchdown. But also I want to point out that this is a bit of an outlier for his receiving numbers, as he never had more than 4 receptions in any other games and only accomplished that twice in 2024. So as much as I do want to hype Brooks up, I do want to be transparent and admit that if you remove that Oklahoma State game and adjust his final season finish of just 19 receptions for 134 yards, it is a lot less inspiring as a pass catcher. But what was inspiring was his performance on the ground, as he rushed for over 120 yards in all of his highlight games and did so in 9 of his 11 games. That level of consistency is very impressive and speaks to his ability to guarantee movement in the right direction to extend drives. But to see how good of a rusher he is, and to see if his Oklahoma State game really is fluky, let's take a look at some of his grades. For his counterbalance and elusiveness, he has such great size and runs with a lot of strength. At times he can be a bowling ball and will typically finish his runs falling forward. He also consistently keeps his legs moving and has good drive to be able to deliver on short yardage and goal line opportunities. I do agree that it's probably fun to envision the speedier backs breaking out big plays, but the running back's job is to be able to extend drives, and Brooks can do that with his power and size. Though he does have trouble making defenders miss, he does have good awareness to be able to at least force them off balance and around the line of scrimmage to get a gain. However, he can sometimes get a bit jump cut happy behind the line of scrimmage, which can sometimes affect how much momentum he has going forward and how many yards he can pick up. What also impacts how many yards he can pick up around the line of scrimmage is his pad level. While it's almost always good in the second level, he can be a bit upright runner around the line of scrimmage, which can affect his drive. He also has a lot of trouble making quicker defenders miss in open space, often settles just trying to plow through them. I'd also like to see him do a better job trying to set up before contact and try to minimize blows and preserve himself. So while I was hoping he'd finish higher in this area, with some inconsistencies here in just a B for his contact balance and just a C- for his elusiveness. For his receiving and pass blocking, now this is where Brooks really surprised me, and I think both are such underrated parts of his game. A lot of people will look at Brooks' 2024 season and just assume he's a bruiser who at least is capable of body catches based on his low receiving yard total, and while Brooks definitely is a bruiser, he has some really impressive ball skills. He consistently catches the ball with good hand technique, and he's comfortable catching the ball away from his body and even over his shoulders, which very few backs in this class can pull off. He also has a surprisingly good transition from pass catcher to rusher, which can give him time to be able to adjust to oncoming defenders. Also, he can improvise and can move to open space when the quarterback scrambles. He could also continue to earn passing down work thanks to his pass blocking. He has great size and strength to hold up as the blocker and isn't afraid to throw hard hits or chips when going off for his routes. He also has a really good eye at identifying his assignment when the defense decides to blitz them. While he is a surprisingly good pass catcher, I do have worries about his ceiling as a pass catcher in the NFL. He can go out and run more complex routes from the backfield, but his lack of speed and acceleration will likely make him easier to cover against better athletes. If he wants to prove me wrong in this, he'll need to work to make his cuts more concise, as he can often need a couple extra steps that further slow his process. Also, while he does have good hands, I did find a few times when he did have to double catch balls that were thrown away from his frame. I also found a few lapses in pass protection that will need to be cleaned up as well. He can sometimes get stuck staring at pass protection and miss tackles who are starting to lose their leverage. Also, he doesn't always get his feet set in his block, which can make it easier to get past him despite his size. He can also sometimes get a bit too eager to give a hit and will drive with his shoulder and not give a clean block that would hold up better against his target. So Brooks ended up finishing with a very impressive B+ for his receiving, which of those that haven't watched him, probably this is very surprising, but I swear, this dude can catch. Also, he can help in pass protection and got a solid B-. For his vision and ball handling, this is another area that Brooks really shines in. He has great vision around the line of scrimmage and at the second level and knows how to maximize his blocks. He does a good job pressing the line of scrimmage and then take the most optimal path to be able to compensate for his lack of great speed. He can also do a good job hugging his blocks and can get skating through tight closing creases. He's a very patient runner, has a good eye for cutback lanes, and he's also able to use jump cuts to navigate at the second level while also having great peripheral vision out in space. Also with the experience that he's had, he has run a lot of zone and gap runs and looked very comfortable and confident in both. While his vision is good though, he can sometimes misread the leverage of his blocks and lead himself into trouble that he can't make up for with his lack of great athleticism. But overall, he's a very calm, safe, collected runner with his eyes. Also, despite the high volume, he didn't have very many fumbles with just one fumble every 157 touches, which also similar to Brashard Smith, both came in the same game against Arizona for him. So if we remove that game, he would have had 292 touches without a fumble, which is extremely impressive. So with so much experience and so many times showing he can handle different types of runs, Brooks earned an A- for his vision. For his ball handling, he earned a B+, which again, could have been higher had the Arizona game not happened. For his future role in athleticism or RAS, what also makes me such a big fan of Brooks is the way he can fit into nearly any offense. With so many of the other backs in this class, we have to think about what situations they have to be in to be able to hide their weaknesses or leverage their strengths to make them work, but Brooks is so good at everything that he can help as a rusher, pass catcher, and pass blocker. There's just so much to like about him and why I think he's one of the most underrated backs in the class, and potentially one of the most underrated prospects in this entire class. It's just hard for me to think of a way that he can't come in and at the minimum help as a goal line back or a third down back. Now what's holding me back from loving him is his lack of speed and acceleration. Now, I'm in the fan of not all running backs need great speed. However, I will also be the first to admit that I think it does make things a lot easier for backs. Without those traits being great, backs need to be able to have great vision and power on every play to get early down work and be able to be reliable as a pass catcher to get extended runs on the field. I do think Brooks checks off a lot of those boxes, but the small margin of error of his athleticism causes him to be a bit risky. If you saw his 4.52 40-yard dash time, you might feel like I'm overreacting. However, it is important to note that he was listed a whole 15 pounds lighter than his listed weight for the season. So I honestly wouldn't be surprised if he trimmed down for the combine knowing he had to run faster, and if he actually plays at a heavier weight, which also makes him a little bit slower. So with the ability to contribute in nearly any way, Brooks earned a B for his future role. Also, though his testing might be a bit fluky based on his true weight that he plays at, he did earn a green flag for his athleticism or RAS based off his combine testing. As a summary of his strengths, he has very good size and contact balance, and uses the power he has to be able to be a very effective rusher between the tackles and in short yardage situations. What also helps him finish runs in those situations is great vision. He can use this to find openings in congested messes, but can also spot openings outside and know how to attack them and manipulate defenders to get the most out of his rush. He is also such an underrated player as a pass blocker and pass catcher. His pass blocking isn't perfect, but he has a great foundation and can use good size to be able to one day become a great pass blocker down the road under some NFL coaching. Also, I was really impressed with the adjustments he could make to be able to finish catches. That makes me confident he can help more in the receiving game if he's asked to do so in the NFL. Now, as much as I want to be the leader of the Tahj Brooks fan club this year, he isn't perfect as he can get a big jump cut happy, especially around the line of scrimmage, which can impact his contact balance and ability to drive through tackles. Speaking of going through tackles, he doesn't have a lot of ability to make defenders miss in space, and likely will just have to rely on lowering his shoulder into them in the NFL. This is especially the case since he lacks great top speed and acceleration, which could make him a lot less exciting for NFL fans and potentially coaches. Also, while he is a good pass catcher, I don't think he'll be an exciting downfield threat due to his athletic limitations. Finally, while he is a really promising pass blocker, he does have some mental lapses that he needs to clean up to become a great pass blocker. So by taking the average of all his grades, Brooks earned a 2.95 out of 4, which puts him in my good role player tier. Tahj Brooks isn't the most exciting running back, however I do think he's a back with the best shot to be able to have a long NFL career. He is very good at a lot of important things, with his vision, contact balance, pass catching, and pass blocking, which he pairs with good size and power to make him a very well-rounded back. I think Brooks is a player who could really surprise if he does go to a weak backfield, and could end up earning an every down role thanks to the way he can contribute in many different ways. As for a comp, I think his biggest fans want to comp to David Montgomery since that's everyone's favorite big body player who can also catch the ball comp right now. However, there's so much about Brooks that reminds me of Kareem Hunt, who I was also a big fan of during his draft cycle. Both run the ball with great vision between the tackles and have a great eye for how to use their blocks at the second level. Both are also great at consistently finishing runs going forward to guarantee a consistent gain. Both are also very underrated pass catchers who are capable pass blockers barring some lapses. However, neither are great athletes which could limit their upside and touches if a coach wants a more athletic back. Also, neither has great ability to be able to make defenders miss in the open field and have to rely on their power and vision to make the most of their opportunities. Hunt got off to a great start and has had a steady career as a contributor after his run-in with the law. I don't expect Brooks to have any type of early impact like Hunt had early in his career, but I do see Brooks having a long, productive career similar to Hunt. Now moving to our big household name of this group, TreVeyon Henderson from Ohio State. Henderson has been recognized as a talented back and broke out as a true freshman rushing for 1,248 yards and 15 touchdowns with a yards per carry of 6.8, which is ridiculous as a freshman. However, since then, he has struggled to stay healthy. After missing some time his junior year, but still impressing the times he did play, he did take a gamble and decided to return to school for his senior year despite other top back Quinshon Judkins transferring to the school. Well, the gamble paid off and Henderson had his most efficient year, rushing for 1,016 yards and 10 touchdowns on 144 carries for a ridiculous yards per carry of 7.1. He was also extremely productive as a pass catcher, making 27 receptions for 284 yards and a touchdown. That type of production would look good for a lot of lead backs at a lot of schools, but that is especially impressive for the timeshare that Henderson was in, and best of all, it helped keep him healthy. To also add to that ridiculousness, Henderson also avoided fumbling the ball and made it 2 years in a row without a fumble on 346 touches. For his highlight games, I included his playoff games similar to Judkins, but just like Judkins, it can be hard to get too much out of this since Henderson had less than 15 touches in all his highlight games, and honestly even failed to get 15 touches in any of the other games this season. So there might be a bit of a fair criticism as he had fresh legs compared to other guys who were continually on the field. But with that said, let's take a look to see what his grades look like to know for sure how good he was. For his contact balance and elusiveness, he is capable of manipulating defenders in open space to throw them off balance to minimize the impact of their hit and help him slide off tackles. He also helps himself stay up thanks to his improved pad level, which he ran with the majority of the season, in addition to his having good balance and quick feet. While Henderson was solid at worst in a lot of areas, one area he really faltered was in short yardage situations. At his size, he just really struggles to get much of any push in short yardage situations, but what also doesn't help is that he sometimes can get caught with his legs frozen a bit when going through contact, which contributes to him going down with initial contact. There are just too many times when he would struggle with surviving the initial hit and would go down the first contact, which does make me worried about him going to a team where initial contact could come much earlier in plays than it did at Ohio State. Another worry of mine is his tendency to get caught moving sideways, especially if he goes to a team with a poor offensive line, as that can sometimes cause him to miss out on an extra yard or two had he just continued to move forward. Also, he will have to get more creative in open space, as he often just goes for a simple juke, which is a bit disappointing since the twitch he has gives him the potential to make defenders miss in open space much more frequently. So for Henderson's contact balance, he earned just a C+, but a pretty good B+ for his elusiveness. For his receiving and pass blocking, these were the traits that made him my RB1 in the summer going into the 2023 season. I was instantly impressed with his pass catching ability as he had reliable hands and is very comfortable catching the ball away from his body. He's also very quick with getting his head turned around and his hands ready to receive the pass. Once he catches the ball, he has a smooth transition downfield and has the burst to get up to full speed very quickly. Now the thing that will give him an edge over a lot of the other backs in his class is his pass blocking. Despite his size, he's arguably one of the best pass blockers in his class, thanks to his veteran experience quickly identifying his assignment and getting to his spot to be able to then use proper timing and leverage to deliver a strong hit. When he finds his target, he does a good job getting square and isn't afraid to initiate contact. There are some great highlights out there of hard chip blocks and one-on-one reps where he just dusts a guy. Now while he has good hands and was often used in a screen game and swing passes, I would like to see him a bit more involved downfield and even out wide and from the slot if possible. When he is playing from the backfield and pass plays and used as a blocker, he will need to be sure to not try to overcompensate for his lack of size. There are a few times he tried to go for a hard chip or a standard block and left his feet too early, losing his balance and then had a relatively ineffective block. So Henderson begins his streak with a B+ for his receiving and pass blocking to have 3 B+ in a row. Let's see if we can keep that streak up. For his vision and ball handling, his vision on screen plays when he has a convoy of blockers in front of him is incredibly impressive as on full display in the semifinals against Texas. In open space, he shows really great curvilinear movements, which he helps use to navigate through traffic. Speaking of navigating traffic, he can do a really great job getting skating through tight creases and using his burst to blast through holes. In general, I was really impressed with the improvements he made in his vision this year. Now, it's still not perfect, but he did do a better job reading the leverage of his blocks and was more efficient in finding cutback lanes. He also did a good job setting up his blocks and manipulating defenders to make the most of his blocks. Now, while he did make improvements to his vision, there are still additional opportunities, including diversifying his tempo to help manufacture more openings. He also did a better job cutting back inside on outside runs, but he can still sometimes default to just flowing outside at one speed. Also, I like to see him hug his blocks a bit more frequently on his cutback and inside runs to help him make these runs more efficient. However, as I mentioned before, Henderson didn't have a single fumble in 2024 or 2023 and has minimal fumbles throughout his 4-year college career. So unfortunately, Henderson breaks his B+ streak and earned just a B for his vision. However, he made up for it by earning an A for his ball handling. For his future role in athleticism at Rats, similar to Brooks, there just isn't a whole lot that Henderson can't do. He has great athleticism to pair with quality passing down skills as a pass catcher and blocker to be a big play threat. Also, he has very good vision to be a regular contributor on the ground. His contact balance to survive hits and creativity making defenders isn't great, but both are still very solid and things I wouldn't consider deficits of his compared to his peers. The big thing for Henderson is if he can be just as successful with more being put on him. He was great as a freshman with more volume, but that was a career high in touches for him, and he struggled with injuries in 2022 and 2023 when the team tried to give him more touches. But he struggled with injuries in 2022 and 2023 when he was more of a lead back. So I just worry that while he's great in bursts, NFL teams may look to prioritize keeping him healthy and rested to make the most out of his touches like Ohio State did. So though Henderson may be at risk of being delegated into a committee, the NFL in general is trending towards that direction anyways for most teams, and he did at least show great success in one in 2024, which led him to earning a B+ for his future role. For his athleticism at RAS, he easily earned a green flag. For a summary of his strengths, he has such a great skill set to at minimum be a good committee back or a plus third down back in the NFL with his great pass blocking and reliable hands. Also, he's very elusive in space and has great burst to be able to make big gains once he catches the ball and can do so on the ground as well. Outside of his athleticism, he's also able to make big plays on the ground thanks to the step forward he made with his vision as a rusher. That continued improvement shows we have a prospect who's still capable of growing better and can work to continue to improve his remaining deficits. Speaking of those deficits, while his vision is improved, he can still work to further improve his tempo to take his rushing ability to the next level. The biggest thing though that can take his overall game to the next level is improving his contact balance. That's the biggest thing holding him back from being viewed as a top back and a potential star. He needs to find a way to transfer those good habits of leveraging and lowering his pads and pass protection, and do the same when he's rushing to be able to finish through tackles. If he can do that and also focus on finishing runs downfield more, the sky's the limit. Also, I would really like to see him be more creative in space. As I mentioned, he has the ability to make defenders miss, but it was just disappointing he didn't pull it off enough. Finally, with the previous injury history and great success in the committee for 2024, he might be viewed as just a committee back and have to deal with the suffering of success from his last year. So by taking the average of all his grades, Henderson earned a 3.24 out of 4, which puts him in my good starter tier and just barely missing out on my top tier prospect tier. If there's one word that describes TreVeyon Henderson, it has to be reliable. He is reliable with protecting the ball, catching his targets, and holding up at pass pro. While it's possible he may not have the ceiling of some of the other backs in the class, he definitely has one of the highest floors, which will be very appealing to a number of teams. While teams may view him as a possible committee back due to his improved efficiency and healthy season this year, they should just view him as a playmaker and someone who can be a big-time contributor for them in the future. As for a comp, due to both likely starting their careers as committee backs but having the skill sets to be every down backs, I have Tony Pollard and Henderson's comp. Both Pollard and Henderson lack excellent speed but have great bursts to still be big playmakers. Also, both are very reliable pass catchers and good pass blockers to ensure they aren't liabilities on the field. Both are also very elusive to be able to slide off tackles and get their tackles off balance to minimize contact. Similar to Pollard, I expect Henderson to likely start out his career in a committee, but could be destined for a bigger role in the future if he stays healthy and is dependable in the NFL. Now to finish off this series, we have Georgia running back Trevor Etienne. Taking a look at his basic stats, from a raw total, they aren't very impressive, but he did miss time due to injury in 2024. In the games he did play, he rushed for 609 yards and 9 touchdowns on 122 carries for yards per carry of 5. Which isn't as good as a lot of the other backs, but I actually thought he did a pretty good job running the ball this year, but we'll get into that later. While he wasn't that productive as a rusher, he was a very productive pass catcher, making 32 receptions for 194 yards, which is very impressive given the time he missed. Look at his highlight games against Notre Dame, both Texas games, and Alabama. He was pretty solid in all the games outside his Notre Dame game, but that game he was playing with the team's backup quarterback, which led Notre Dame's defense clog the running lanes more frequently, which were a big part of the issues he had that game. For the other games, he was very good in both Texas games, totaling over 100 yards and scored at least 2 touchdowns in both. There isn't a lot to bring up with his Alabama games, he didn't get much work, but looking at these games, I think we'd see a common thread of Etienne being a regular contributor as a pass catcher. So while it seems to be that he's a good pass catcher, let's see if there's anything we can find from his rushing that led to some of his inconsistent totals with some of his grades. For his contact balance and elusiveness, despite his smaller frame, he can survive hits thanks to his good balance and pad level. He also does a good job keeping his legs moving through contact and has good awareness to finish his runs going forward instead of sideways to maximize his gains. He also shows some good awareness of knowing how to adjust to his body to be able to be off-centered from hits to keep himself upright. When he wants to avoid contact, he also has quick feet and can manipulate linebackers and defensive linemen in the hole. While he has good contact balance, his smaller stature may make it difficult for him to have this translate to the NFL. Also, his smaller size makes it hard for him to push piles in the NFL, and he likely won't be doing that at all. Also, while he is quick in his cuts, he isn't that explosive in his moves, so that can make it harder for him to be able to consistently make corners and safeties miss in open space. Also, he sometimes isn't able to break away from defenders despite his combine testing. Also, he sometimes isn't able to break away and outrun defenders despite his combine testing. So despite his smaller size, Etienne surprisingly scored a higher grade for his contact balance with a B and earned a B- for his elusiveness. For his receiving and pass blocking, he routinely catches the ball with good hand technique and looks very comfortable catching the ball away from his body. He is also able to quickly snatch the ball to secure it, and then efficiently can turn upfield with minimal wasted movement. He also shows good awareness when he's out on his route to move toward open space to move with his quarterback if they're on the move. Though he didn't get a lot of opportunities to help as a pass blocker, he did hold up pretty well despite his size. He does a good job getting square with his target and does a good job using his hands on most blocks. Unfortunately, his smaller size will likely cause issues in pass protection. While he is solid, he likely won't ever be great due to a limited anchor at his size. Also, despite his smaller size, he is an upright blocker, which gives up leverage and lessens his punch. He also can sometimes have poor timing in his hip roll, which can further weaken his punch. Also, he can have a bit of a weak base at times, which further worsens his anchor. When he does try to get more of a punch, he can sometimes lunge to try to compensate for his smaller size. A lot of those issues were part of why he wasn't regularly asked to help in pass protection, and I wouldn't be surprised if he had a similar experience in the NFL. Also, while he is a capable pass catcher, he isn't running complex routes or delivering much over expectations as a route runner. I would really like to see him add more nuance to his route running and make cuts quicker to be able to make him more effective in the passing game. So with a really great foundation and potential to do more as a pass catcher, Etienne earned a B+ for his receiving. Also, while it was on few reps, he did look solid as a pass blocker and earned a B- for his pass blocking. For his vision and ball handling, he looks very comfortable in both gap and zone schemes, which should help him translate success to the NFL. Also, he does a good job hugging his blocks to help maximize his runs between the tackles. He also has a good eye for cutback lanes and good vision for defenders at the second level. He even showed the ability to be able to press the line to get defenders crashing and then bounce his runs inside or outside. Also, he has a very good eye for leverage of his blocks and can use his lateral quickness to weave through traffic. However, he still sometimes struggles with good tempo and doesn't always let his blocks develop. This also causes him to sometimes run into his blocks instead of easing up a bit to be able to let his blocker clear space. Also, he'll need to work on limiting his fumbles. He only had 2 on the year, but he had a pretty low amount of touches, which led to a disappointing fumble rate of 1 fumble every 77 touches. So Etienne got a B for his vision, but broke his streak of earning some type of B by earning just a C for his ball handling. For his future role in athleticism or RAS, there isn't a lot Etienne can't do, which should bode well to his ability to impress a coaching staff. On top of that, he has the potential to be a very good pass catcher. If he is able to take a step forward and be more involved in deeper routes, he may be able to have a higher ceiling than I'm giving him credit for. However, I feel like he's more likely to be a high floor, low ceiling type of player in the NFL. His athleticism, contact balance, and looseness are all just okay to slightly above average, but doesn't offer too high of a ceiling. Also, his fumble issues are new this year, but if they continue, they could be an easy rationale for a coach to be able to want to put in a more dynamic and specialized player over him. So thanks to being able to do it all, Etienne earned a B- for his future role. Also, he just barely missed out getting a green flag as he was just barely below that mark and ended up earning a yellow flag for his athleticism or RAS. For a summary of Etienne's strengths, he's very comfortable running in both gap and zone runs, which should make him an easy fit for any team. Also, he runs a very good pad level to help survive tackles and quick feet to be able to avoid them sometimes in space. On passing downs, though he had limited opportunities as a pass blocker, I felt he did look solid and could continue to grow with more experience. Also, he's a very reliable pass catcher with the potential to do even more if given the chance. Though he could have the potential to do more as a pass catcher, he still has to prove it since he primarily just helped on short dump-offs. Also, he needs to find a way to get better anchor and pass protection situations to ensure his quarterback stays upright. That being said, it might be a bit of a losing battle since his smaller stature may limit his ability to do that. Also, his smaller stature may also make it harder for him to plow through defenders, and he isn't exactly elusive to consistently make defenders miss in space either. Finally, for some backs, this could be viewed as a strength, but Etienne is a jack of all trades, master of none, which is something I do consider concerning for him, especially with his new fumble issues, as that could spell the end of his role with the team. So by taking the average of all his grades, Etienne earned a 2.76 out of 4, which just barely puts him in my good role player tier. Etienne is a player who's hard for me to describe without sounding too positive or too negative about him. Overall, he's a jack of all trades, master of none type of prospect, and his well-roundedness could be appealing for an NFL team, or could also make him less desirable since there isn't one thing that makes him stand out compared to his peers. If he does go to a team looking for a feature back or a big-time playmaker, they're likely going to be disappointed. However, a team just wants a solid contributor who can do nearly anything on offense that it needs and be able to help in diverse schemes. He can be there and should be on their list. As for a comp, I have Justice Hill as Etienne's comp. Similar to Etienne, Hill has quick feet but lacks great athleticism to break off big plays. However, both have good contact balance for their size and are capable pass catchers to help make them more appealing. Neither are great pass blockers but are both respectable blockers at their size. Both also have good vision but need to improve their tempo as rushers. Hill has now been slotted in as a role player due to being Hill has now been slotted into as being a role player due to not being exceptional at any specific trait, but does still have a clear role with the team. While that may sound less than ideal, keeping a roster spot and keeping that role is really important in the NFL with such a high turnover at the position. I think Etienne could have a similar career as a player who may be more appreciated by the fans of his teams than the rest of the NFL thanks to his reliability, even if he isn't making the most splashy plays from time to time. And that's finally all the running backs for this year's running back series. I hope you all enjoyed it and learned at least something about one or two of the backs throughout it. Let me know what your thoughts are on all the backs in the comments and who you think I'm too high or too low on. And currently I'm working on my receiver series, which should include at least my top 50 receivers, and hoping to have that out soonish, maybe next week if I'm lucky, but there's just a lot of players I gotta get through. But to make sure you don't miss out when that does kick off, or any other future positional series, be sure to subscribe. While you're at it, like the videos, it would help the channel and series grow thanks to you. If you want just a written form of the eval, you can subscribe to my Substack, as I'll have the full written eval for each player out at the same time as the video. But thank you all, and see you all next time.